I've been watching League of Legends esports basically since 2014 to 15 that I can remember, and I might have watched slightly earlier, but I feel like the resolution of that video that I would manage to actually watch probably wasn't actually. I was more watching pixels on the screen that kind of represented League of Legends rather than actually watching League of Legends. And throughout the years and basically decade that I've been watching this game, and playing this game. Some of the most interesting moments, obviously, are the different type of champions, all the different styles that pro players do instead of the solo queue games that I play, or even when I played with my friends, because the game is just so different when you're five players against five players that are relatively equally in skill and kind of predict or kind of know what to do. And seeing the different types of team comps is probably one of the more interesting things that I've seen and that I like to see when it comes to pro play. That is why I think Fearless Draft is one of the best things League of Legends has done for the pro scene in a very long time, because it just creates such interesting takes on team comps and champion diversity in a best of series. Now, if you don't know what Fearless Draft is, I will give you the explanation of it for what it is. Fearless Draft is in a best of three or a best of five series. When you play a champ in game one, you cannot play that same champ in game two. So if you are a mid laner and you play Orianna in game one, you cannot play Orianna in game two or three, four, five. No matter how long the series, once you play that one champ, you cannot play that champ again. But there are still, in game two, there are still the normal bans in the pro scene. There's still the normal 5 bans per team, and it creates a lot of interesting scenarios where there are a lot of different champions being used. Now, of course, there is still a meta. There are still game one where everything is open and, there's a lot of same team comps and the pro players kind of do have their couple champs they always play. But I think it has just opened up so many cool opportunities when it comes to the diversity of champions. And I also think it opens up a lot more reason for the coach position to exist, because I feel like the coach position in League of Legends has almost been a joke for the past forever, honestly, in League of Legends, because first of all, most of the coaches aren't as good as the players. And it's not like a traditional sports game where there was a lot of out of game planning, because basically it was draft and that was it. And basically for the longest time in League of Legends, it was basically the same draft over and over and over again. Pretty much. Like, I don't know how many times we saw Corki Azir in the mid lane for the longest time. Nowadays it's it is Orianna Azir. But while those still exist, they only exist for one match in the new Fearless system. And before, it was literally every game. Basically, every single game was Corki Azir for a good portion of the mid lane. And there was the same, basically, 10 champs that everyone played. Arguably, you can say 10 to 15, because obviously it wasn't the exact same every time, but it was very similar. Nowadays, in a best of series, can go really crazy sometimes. For pro play, I do have to put. Because obviously, a lot of the pro players do pick safe things or champions that they are comfortable with. Like, for instance, I don't ever see Ezreal ever really not being played in the pro scene. One, because he's really mobile and he's just a good champion to play safe. And two, there's so many AD carries in the league that have played so much Ezreal that it doesn't matter that whether or not he's actually a good meta champion. Skill will overall be better because he's just so good and safe in the hands of a lot of these players. And I think that is one of the reasons why I have enjoyed watching League of Legends so much recently, along with, finding Cajal, first of all, because I watch a lot of it through him, and ignoring the NA scene because it makes me sad and depressed. But truthfully, Fearless, I think, is one of the reasons why I have enjoyed it as much as I have. To the point of where it is now the primary thing I watch when it comes to video game content. If there is matches to watch for League in any of the European, the Korean, or the Chinese stuff, I generally just choose to watch that, which is not something I have done for many, many years before I kind of branched off of League of Legends. And one of the things that brought me back was the Fearless Chef, because it was, first of all, it was really interesting, in my opinion, because of the change to the pro system and now players are going to have to learn a lot more champions. In the beginning, we thought people were going to have to learn many different types of champions, but realistically, it's like 3 to 5 because, you know, best of threes or best of fives. Best of five is the longest you ever go, and even with the fearless bans and the regular bans, arguably you still really only need to know 3 to 5 champions at a pro level, and then just know the champions after that. Because there are, you know, there are metas and there are things that happen in the league scene that are never going to leave. Like, for instance, I mentioned Azir before, but another champion like that in the mid lane specifically is going to be probably Ryze. I never see Ryze ever leaving, no matter how bad or good he is in the meta, because a good player on Ryze sometimes just literally wins you the game. And I think Lost Ratones, when they were doing their EU run, really proved that, because mid lane Ryze for them was so good because of Nemesis being just so good on Ryze. And for AD carries, once again, the Israel is probably never going to leave. And honestly, even for like top lane as well, going through all the lanes, things like Gnar and Renekton are always still there. Though, to be fair, they're not against each other every time. Before, it was basically Gnar Renekton every game, I feel like. Or it was Renekton versus tank, or Aatrox versus tank. But overall, while that still kind of is true, there's just so many more options. And I feel like it is partly, first of all, starting this talk with the coaches and giving them more reason. It did kind of expose some of the coaches that actually weren't good at their job. And luckily, I feel like we've gone through a purging of the bad coaches, and actually good drafting matters a lot more, I feel like, because it becomes so much more complicated, and there's a lot also more, not on the fly, but in the series decision making, because you don't fully know what's going to be available in games 2, 3, 4, and 5, depending on how long the series goes. So seeing how well teams can adapt to different scenarios is just super interesting. I'm also curious if it's ever going to create a 6-man team or 7-man team that actually works in League of Legends, because honestly, it has pretty much never worked, realistically, because all the teams that have done that pretty much only ever used one person. I still remember the time when SKT, or T1, I think that at the time they were called now, then, when they played EasyHoon instead of Faker, because EasyHoon was just winning anyway, and so, like, it really didn't matter. And, like, true, technically that was a successful 6-man, but they weren't really doing 6-man things. Like, I don't know, I feel like maybe with Fearless Draft it has a chance to actually be more interesting for the 6-man stuff. But the problem is if for the 6-man, whatever lane he is, they just get banned out, if they are specialized in certain champions, you know that if the bruiser top laner is in, you don't need to worry about tanks. And if he plays in a tank, well, then he's just weaker. And so I feel like that's one of the reasons why, even with Fearless, I'm still not super convinced that 6-man stuff is going to work. And to be fair, most teams don't even bother trying that nowadays. So obviously they also agree with me. But it is going to be interesting to see the evolution of Fearless, because it is the second year of Fearless Draft. And from what I can tell, while not entirely the same problem of the same champions over and over and over again, there still is some problems with similar champions over and over and over again. Because, like, for instance, Azir Orianna in the mid lane, I don't know if you're ever going to truly get rid of that, because it's just such a good matchup, and not only are the players comfortable with it, Azir and Orianna are just good champions in the mid lane. Especially right now, because control mages are so good in mid lane. So, like, it's kind of like an oxymoron, I feel like, because Fearless Draft is supposed to try to solve the same champions over and over and over again problem that League Pro Play has had. But Fearless Draft only does that a little bit. But even with that only a little bit, I have enjoyed it so much more, because the chances of different champions are a lot more, or at least different champions that kind of do the same thing. Like, I feel like it's expanded the pool of champions. One, because it forces players to play other champions in pro play. But another big thing is that, true, Azir Orianna is insanely good in the mid lane because of the control mages, their combos, and all that type of stuff. But, like, other control mages in the mid lane that do their job as well are also really good. So even if you ban Azir Orianna, or you let it through, it's only one match. And I think that's the biggest difference, I feel like, for the same champs every game is that if you do get that matchup, it's only for one game and you don't have to worry about it. So it's like, do you let that player that it's really known for Azir to play Azir one match in a best of 3 or best of 5? Because if you say we're going to ban Azir every game, that means you're down one ban every single game. So it's going to be, it's interesting to see like the conversation, or obviously we don't see the literal conversation, but the tactics of teams saying, okay, are we going to let this through? I think one of the bigger things recently is, do teams let Rumble through? Or even though I disagree with Varus, a lot of teams think Varus is still really good. I don't like Varus personally, but that's also because, I just see him die a lot. But that's also kind of like an AD carry problem. And in the beginning, I kind of had a fear that Fearless Draft was going to be shelved from Riot, but because not only me, but everyone loved Fearless Draft, I'm so glad they kept it for this year. And honestly, I just hope they continue keeping it, along with the updates they did when for pro teams, they now get to choose side and who gets first pick in the draft. And it's just really interesting to see teams' strategy around it. And once again, giving the coaches more things to not do, because it's not like they don't do nothing, but more things to not just prove themselves, but show, hey, we are also a good integral part of the team. A good coach that can set up good drafts and good side selection and pick selection, when knowing when to do when things, or when to say, hey, we should do this, or letting players do what they want to do, I think is a really good sign of a good coach. Because like, obviously you want players to be comfortable, but sometimes you have to be like, hey, this is going to be really good in this scenario. And for the most part, as long as you have good relationships with the players, they should also agree as well. And I feel like a lot of teams do that, at least the better teams. And it's nice to see that some of the comps and or like duos in bot lane that you always hear players talk about, like in scrims and stuff like that, or you hear commentators and like the league community that knows the pro scene talk about like these dominant scrim champions. I think the biggest one that I always recognized was Caitlyn Karma, but you never see that in a best of 3 or best of 5 in before Fearless. And nowadays I've seen Caitlyn, I feel like, more times than I've ever seen Caitlyn, because she gets destroyed by certain champions and certain supports and certain duos, but as soon as those are gone in a game at 3 or 4, Caitlyn all of a sudden is a pretty good AD carry, when a lot of her, not direct counters, but like a lot of her problem champions are gone, and you can play the Caitlyn with whatever range support or something like that. And I think that's the thing that I really enjoy about Fearless. It isn't just that I'm seeing more champions, I'm just seeing the champions that I've heard pros talk about all the time finally come out, and then also be extremely frustrated with the exact same thing that I just said by seeing the scrim champions, because I've seen a lot of Jace as well, and I just hate Jace. I just don't think Jace is actually that good, because no one plays on stage like they do in scrims except for the Chinese teams, because the Chinese teams are crazy and will just fight you until someone wins, but everyone else plays so much more safe. And so like picking Jace means you're going to get a 10 CS lead if you're picking a top. Or when Jace jungle this year was a really big thing in scrims, and every time I saw it I was like, okay, it seems that it just gets dumpstered on stage because everyone's playing safe, because no one plays solo queue games on stage, very rarely. Everyone's playing a lot more safe, a lot more calculated, if anything, for the fact that they don't want to mess up on broadcast, which makes sense considering. And so once again, double-edged sword, I feel like, when it comes to that, because I get to see the champions, the games 3 and onwards, that some people always talk about as like, oh, this champion's really good, but against certain things it gets destroyed. But once those things are out, players are more willing to pick it. And sometimes you kind of just have to hope for the best in games 4s and 5s, because like there's so many champions out in those final games that the team comps are so weird, and you see a lot more solo queue-esque champions that everyone remembers seeing in the olden days of League and or in their own solo queue games when they used to play, or even when they play today, but you rarely see on stage nowadays. For instance, even in my most recent things, I've seen Kha'Zix the more times this year, I feel like, or this season, slash last season during Fearless that I've seen in a very long time, because Kazakh hasn't been that good in pro in a long time, because assassins just don't really work in pro anymore, because killing one target is harder to do in isolation because everyone is just better, so not as many people are getting caught, at least from what I've seen and what I've seen people talk about, and why certain assassin types aren't doing as well. And, win lane, win game isn't exactly as easy to do nowadays. It is much easier to come back and or lose gracefully, I feel like, as some people say, because getting a 20 CS lead doesn't matter as much as dying 3 times, obviously. So pro players are really good at that. And to be fair, the game has changed a lot over the years, obviously. So obviously different metas and all that type of stuff. But I do feel like Fearless has opened up so many things because it only has a 1 game threat. And I really hope that they never take Fearless away. I don't think Riot is dumb enough to do that. There is, like, the back of my mind 1% chance that they do it, but I think Fearless is here to stay, because I think it was such a great decision. Everyone really loves it in terms of a viewing experience. I'm sure the players are slightly annoyed about it, maybe, because obviously there's a lot more randomness, or not, maybe randomness is not the right term, but there's a lot more things to pay attention to, and obviously the less things they have to work on, the easier it is to be good. Which, I mean, for them makes sense, but for an audience is kind of boring. So it's nice to see all these different champions, or at least potential. Like, obviously we still see same champions all the time because they're the best champions, but there's just a lot more willingness to take things out. 1, because it's only for 1 game, or 2, because if you let the OP thing through, it's just for 1 game. And it just makes it for a much more exciting experience, in my opinion. And hopefully forever, as long as League survives, which I don't think it won't. Thank you everyone for watching today's video and hear me talk about the Fearless draft stuff, because I've been watching so much League recently that I need to talk about it at least sometimes, or I feel like I'm just doing nothing. Except for enjoying myself, which, I mean, that is a good thing overall. If you'd like to support the channel, please subscribe to it. I really appreciate it if you do. I do these types of videos on Fridays, so come over to the channel on Friday to hear these opinion videos if you would like to hear more stuff. I talked about Overwatch the past couple times, as well as other topics as well. If you would like to support me directly, please go over to the Patreon at patreon.com/TechnoJelly. You join all of these nice people in the credits, as well as a once-a-month live stream that I do. You can vote on what we do, and we can hang out together and discuss all the cool things, play games, all that good stuff. If you would like a product that I'm affiliated with, you can go to poggers.shop. In the description down below, they do energy drink mixes, hydration mixes, and sleep aid mixes. If you would like to get 10% off, I have a code TechnoJelly at checkout if you would like to do that. Once again, TechnoJelly for 10% off any of their products. And if you'd like to follow me on other platforms, I have a Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, and Threads. Click or tap my face if you would like to check out more videos. And I'll see you in those videos. Goodbye, everyone.